Whatever you do, do not take your motorhome to Morocco without watching this video. Have you ever been to Morocco in your motorhome? Let me know in the comments below. So we're currently on our third stretch now in Morocco, so we thought it would be a great chance to be able to pass on some really important bits of information, some key things that you'll want to know before you jump on that ferry and make your way over to Africa. Number one, the essential documents that you're going to need. So, obviously you're going to need things like your passport to get you over the border, but you're going to need things to like your V5. Now, with that, that's going to allow you to get your vehicle into Morocco. Now, when you get into the port, they'll give you a little white rectangular piece of paper, and that's your vehicle import ticket. So that is really important that you don't lose that. So when you go there with your V5, they will pass that information on for you. Now, with insurance, not many places now will provide insurance for motorhomes in Morocco. So a lot of the time people will buy their insurance from the port on the way in at the other side at Tangier Med or Tangier, depending on which one you sail to. So you can get that insurance there. Now, it's important to know that that is third party only when you buy it at the port. So it's not comprehensive, it's not third party fire and theft. You're literally only covered if someone damages your vehicle. Now, if you've got comprehensive insurance from a UK insurer, then you'll need to make sure you bring your green card along with you. And don't worry about anything like an international driving permit. All that you'll need is your driver's license and your V5. Number two, crossing the border. So we normally get the ferry crossing from Algeciras to Tangier Med. So we haven't got any of the others, so I can only speak about that one. That tends to be the most popular one. The reason why we get that one is because just the road out of it tends to be a little bit easier than getting the ferry to Tangier and then getting dumped right in the middle of a town. And if you're not used to driving in Morocco, it can be quite an eye-opener. So when you get into the port, so you'll get off the boat, you follow that around. Now, a lot of the time you'll get an X-ray scanner, so they'll make you get out of the vehicle. And then once you drive through and you get that, they'll ask you to pull over. You'll provide them with your vehicle details. That normally takes sort of 5 minutes. They might ask to have a look inside your motorhome. The things that they are looking for and the things that they will ask you about is weapons and drones. They are anti-weapons and they are anti-drones. So there are places, for example, if you get your tickets from Carlos, you can leave your drone with him, or just don't take a drone at all. Once you've got through the border control and it gives you your vehicle import tag, you will drive up about maybe 50 to 100 meters, and on the left-hand side, there's a series of buildings. Now, those buildings will allow you to be able to get cash out. Morocco is very much a cash country, so you can get cash out, SIM card, and you can also buy insurance from there. Getting your SIM card from there is really important because it just allows you to use things like Google Maps and bits and pieces like that. Number three, driving in Morocco, the rules and realities. I wouldn't be doing you a justice if I said that driving in Morocco is like driving in many other places. Some people that have ever driven in Italy said that it's up there with being quite an interesting experience. I suppose the most important thing that we always advise people now is just go steady. The main roads, the bigger roads, the toll roads, they're absolutely fine. Things that you want to watch out for is just lorries that are always on the inside lane. Sometimes, because it can be quite hilly, they are going really slow. So just making sure you've got a bit of a visibility as to what's coming behind you. But it's when you get off the main roads and you start venturing into the smaller towns and cities where things become a little bit more interesting. We've got examples where we've been going around a roundabout, and the roundabout's got 2 lanes, but sometimes it can be 3 or 4 vehicles across. It can be quite interesting, and you'll probably see some things in Morocco with the driving that you won't see anywhere else. Another thing is scooters. Sometimes scooters will come the wrong side of the road, and pedestrians. The pedestrians, they'll just walk out. They'll just walk out in the road. So just always make sure you've got your eyes open, you're alert, and like I say, just the key is to never ever be in a rush. Another thing with driving in Morocco is that police checkpoints are quite common. They like to check that you're not speeding. There'll be a red sign that you will see often. It was described to us as like seeing two men sitting in a canoe. So that sign means stop. And just make sure that you do stop, because if you don't stop, then there will be somebody watching it and they will pull you over. Another top tip is sometimes you might get pulled over by not real police, but people that are wearing uniforms, perhaps more road traffic people as opposed to police. They'll try and charge you sometimes for speeding. Sometimes I'll tell you it should be 200 or 300 dirhams. I would always keep a 50 dirham note or a 100 dirham note nearby, and then just plead poverty and say, oh, I'm sorry, this is the only cash that I've got. And I've never known an instance where someone's ever said, no, that's not good enough, or let's go to a cash point. So always just make sure you don't show them a full wallet full of cash and just say, oh, I've only got 100. They'll take it. Number 4, preparing your motorhome for Morocco. So there aren't any things particularly which I would say, oh, you might want to go and do that compared to what you wouldn't do if you were going to drive through Spain. So it's just things like just make sure you're keeping on top of your tyres, make sure your tyres are always inflated, make sure your solar's working. One of the great things about Morocco is the weather. So just make sure that your solar is working and your batteries are working. Make sure that if you are going to leave, you're taking as much fresh water as you can. So the water in Morocco isn't drinkable from the taps. So if you can take a bit of extra water from Spain, I would always suggest that, although everywhere in Morocco will sell bottled water. Another tip that we always recommend as well is that because the fuel in Morocco is so cheap, if you are getting the ferry to Tangier Med, make sure you leave about 50, 60, 70 miles of diesel in your tank, so that once you get into Morocco, the first petrol station tends to be around about 15 to 20 miles once you get out the port. So you can get there and you can fill up for about £1 a litre. Number 5, cultural etiquette that everybody should know. Morocco is one of the most beautiful, friendly countries that you will ever go to, but it's a different culture to what we're perhaps used to in the UK or in parts of mainland Europe. So it's about making sure that you are being respectful of other people's traditions. Greet people with salam alaikum and they will greet you with alaikum salam. So that is a friendly welcome. You'll hear words like inshallah all the time, which is God willing. And just as a people, Moroccans are by far the friendliest people that we've ever met on any of our travels anywhere. In terms of dress code, dress modestly, especially in rural areas. Going to markets, haggling as expected, but just be mindful that everyone's got to make a little bit of money. Lisa is an extremely tough negotiator. Sometimes I have to walk away from her and go back and give the guy a little bit of extra money because she beats him down so much. Try and avoid public displays of affection if you can. Sometimes it can be a little bit frowned upon. And if anyone invites you into their house to go and drink some tea, it's polite to go and drink tea in their house and meet the family a lot of the time. And finally, it's important to know that Friday is the holy day. So the same level of service that you might get on some of the other days, you might not necessarily get on a Friday. So always keep that in mind. Number 6, where to stay and wild camping. So although Morocco isn't particularly adverse to wild camping, a lot of the time in the more rural areas there's more wild camping just because simply it's more difficult to police. What you'll tend to find is if you wild camp near campsites, police will be more inclined to move you on and then to move you on to the campsites. We use Park for Night, and we always try and sort of update our stops on Park for Night so we can let people know the experience we've had when we've been there most recently. A lot of the campsites that we've ever stopped on, have all got electric and decent enough electric because it always works with the air conditioning. They've all got waste facilities and water facilities. And so the average that you'll pay for a campsite might be somewhere in the region of about £8 per night. The other alternative, which is a bit of a go-between in between wild camping and campsites, some towns and things like that will have guardian parking. So that'll be a car park that's watched 24 hours a day, and that tends to be around about £3 or £4 per night. One top tip, if you're going to stay on private land, it's always worth asking the landowner's permission beforehand. The last thing that you want to receive is the dreaded knock. And if you are going to wild camp, just make sure that you don't leave any rubbish behind. Sometimes Morocco can have a bit of rubbish in it. Let's not make the situation worse. If anything, take a bag of rubbish with you, and as long as you're respectful, you'll be welcomed back with open arms every time. Number 7, what to pack for the Moroccan climate. So depending on where you go in Morocco, the weather systems can change quite a lot. So the further north, it's more European temperature. And then if you move inland, places like Marrakesh, they tend to be hotter in the day and colder in the night time. And you can go right the way as far as across as Mazuga, which is in the desert. And once again, they're cold at night. They can get really, really hot in the day. And the same can be said for the coast. But a lot of the time, the coast, whether it's winter or summer, the weather tends to be pretty much the same. It tends to be sort of low 20s to mid 20s and maybe 12, 13 degrees overnight. But like I say, inland in the summer, the heat can be extreme, and it's not a surprise in places like Marrakesh or Mazuga to see high 30s, low 40s in terms of temperature. So in terms of packing, depending on what time of year you're going to go and where you're going to go will decide exactly what you should pack. Number 8, navigating Moroccan cities. So once again, like we alluded to a little bit earlier on, driving in the cities and the towns can be a real experience. So we try and avoid doing it if we can in our motorhome. We would rather perhaps stay on the outskirts and get a taxi in or public transport in, just because for us it's not worth it. It can be quite stressful. We would never drive through a Medina in a motorhome. It's just too tight. It would just cause absolute chaos. We always use Google Maps, and Google Maps has been really, really, really good for getting us around. Or if we're driving to a campsite, we use the maps function through Park for Night as well. That's also really, really, really useful. And once again, if you are going to head into a town, once again, Guardian parking is great for that, because the Guardian parking tends to be little hubs. So you can get things like tour guides if you're near Medinas and things like that. And a tour guide is great. Make sure you agree a price beforehand so that they don't try and overcharge you. But if you agree a price beforehand, getting a tour guide can be a fantastic experience, just showing you the sites that you'll want to see in any of the Medinas. Number 9, fuel stops and gas availability. One thing that you won't go short of in Morocco is petrol stations. Even driving like we have done in the desert and in some of the really deep parts of rural Morocco, you can't go very far without seeing a petrol station. The cost of diesel is very, very cheap. They also look and provide you with things like AdBlue. A lot of the time they've got bits of mechanics there, and you can get oil and things like that. One of our favourite things about Morocco is that to fill your car up, you don't even need to get out of the motorhome. You give the guy your keys and he'll open your fuel for you and he'll fill up. We always tip them if they do that. And a petrol station is one of the few places that you can actually use card pretty consistently as well. Smaller petrol stations might only take cash. You'll find petrol stations like Afrique, or you'll find petrol stations like Shell. And they're the sort of places that will take card, but it is always worth having cash with you. And finally, 2 last top tips. So the first one is always make sure that you've got cash with you. Morocco, for all intents and purposes, 85–90% of the time is cash only. So if you're in a restaurant, a lot of the time they will only take cash. If you're in shops, they will only take cash. I say it's only petrol stations really that tends to be the sort of place where you can use your card a vast majority of the time. And finally, my other top tip is just do not drive after dark. It can be stressful enough and challenging enough driving in the day. So we never, ever, 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 ever drive in the dark. If needs be, we'll stop half an hour or an hour short of where we're trying to get to so that we're not having to drive in the dark. So hopefully in this video you will have found a few little bits of advice that will help you on your first trip to Morocco. The best advice and the best tip that I can give you is it is by far the best place that we've ever been to in our motorhome. So if you're on the fence, get off the fence and go.